You know, it doesn't matter if you're published. It doesn't matter if the world sees it. You will see it. It is gratifying you. It's filling your life. It's enriching your world. And guess what? Someday, maybe your children will enjoy reading your stories. Just write them. It's never too late. I mean, if my story doesn't tell you anything else, it tells you that. I was 80 years old when my first book came out and became a bestseller. And I'm 82 now, and my second book just came out in April and has become a bestseller. If you had told me this was going to happen 10 years ago, I would say you're deluded.
This is CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sams, and today on Contagious Influencers, I have with me a delightful woman who just tickled me the entire time I was talking to her. She was so much fun. Her name is Peggy Rowe, R-O-W-E, and she's the mama to somebody that I'm sure you all know, Mike Rowe. He, of course, a big personality, big TV personality. She's written a couple of books. Now, here's the thing. She's 82 years old, and she just decided to write a couple of books, and she and Mike actually published the first one, or he published it for her, and it became like an internet sensation, a big-time winner. It was self-published. I think they sold like 10,000 books, right off the internet, and then bam, they got a publisher. Next thing you know, they got a breakout mega hit. Now they're on their second book, and it's called About Your Father and Other Celebrities I Have Known by Peggy Rowe. And I would highly recommend you get this book because during these crazy times, man, we all need a little chuckle. We all need a little nostalgia. We all need to feel like it's going to be okay and it's all going to work out. And this book is going to do just that. Peggy Rowe, About Your Father and Other Celebrities I Have Known. She is going to talk about not only how they're getting through this whole coronavirus thing, but she's going to talk about her 60-year marriage with her husband. She's going to talk about, her three boys. She has three boys, not just one, but three. And the other thing she's going to talk about is, reinvention. That's something we all have to deal with right now. And that is, my gosh, we may not have a job to go back to. I mean, I'm doing this right now, but frankly, who knows if this is going to last? Who knows if advertising is going to last? Who knows if radio is going to last? Who knows if TV's do you know, I heard the other day that TV is getting more eyeballs than any time in the history of the medium. I mean, of course, now there's all these channels, but I'm talking about the overall audience is humongous, because what else do we have to do? But there has never been a time in American history that the advertising has been so low. I mean, you notice all those PSAs on there, right? Public service announcements. Well, guess what? The networks don't get paid for that. They just put those on. And of course, we really have to talk about reinvention because we may not have a gig to go back to, not a traditional gig, maybe not something that we had, 6 months ago or a year ago. But sometimes I wonder, was this God's way of pushing us out of our comfort zone? Was this God's way of pushing us out of the nest so that we can move on with our lives and do what we're really called to do? I mean, think about it. If you're always comfortable and you're always thinking, boy, this is good or this is as good as it gets, you just don't push yourself out of your comfort zone. You don't push yourself out of that nest. Mama bird has to push you out. In this case, maybe that was God's intention here is to, maybe it thought it was time that it was, that we get out of our comfort zone, or maybe this is just a big, time out because we've been kind of nasty in the last few years. Boy, it's been a tug of war, hasn't it? So here is the interview I did with Peggy Rowe. I know you're going to enjoy it, and please do share it. She also reminded me so much of my mom. They're only a year apart in age. I really get a kick out of Peggy. So here she is, Peggy Rowe. One reason I'm really excited to talk to you is because with everything that's going on, I want some good advice from Mom, number one. Number two, you reinvented yourself at what, age 80?
Well, I've been a writer for years.
I know you were doing the articles and I know you were doing some of the commercial things and so forth, but at what point did the light bulb go off and did you really decide to really truly to reinvent yourself? Because there are so many people out there right now, millions of people who were once something or did something or thought they were something, and now they're going to have to think differently. And that is one thing that I think you can encourage us all with today. Tell us how you woke up one day and you looked at life differently or what you did differently.
Well, I would like to think it were that dramatic, but actually it's not. Life just went on as usual. I have been writing for years. I was continuing to write. And then my son, Mike, maybe you've heard of my son, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
He encouraged me to do a book. I share my writing with Mike, and he shares his with me before it's published. And he loved the stories that I wrote, and he asked me to write a book. So I said, well, okay, I think about it. Well, he wanted me to write. Well, actually, the publishers wanted me to write a story about Mike, a book about Mike, because he is a brand and people know who he is. However, in my years of writing, I've written a lot of stories about my mother, and I got a lot of positive feedback. People love stories about my mother. Mm-hmm. She was an amazing character. So I did a book about my mother, and the publisher said, no, thank you. Nobody's ever heard of, they said to Mike, nobody's ever heard of your mother and nobody's ever heard of your grandmother. This would be a hard sell. So Mike published it and it did well. So
you did a self-published book to begin with, right?
We did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what happened when you did that?
Well, Mike did it. I don't have the wherewithal to do things like that, but Mike is pretty much out there and he decided, it's a good book. People should read it. That was his impression. So he he had 10,000 copies published, put them on eBay, and they sold in weeks. So then the big publishers came calling and they said, well, maybe we will publish this book after all. So that was my wake up moment, I guess. Maybe I can write a book.
It's not bad when you have Mike Rowe as your son pushing your goods, is it? It's not a bad situation.
I am so fortunate. Listen, I wake up every morning and I know how fortunate I am to have Mike in my corner. Because, well, for one thing, Mike is a good critic. And if he says that something's good, I have to take his word for it. He doesn't, there's no fooling around. He tells it like it is. If he likes something that I write, he tells me. If he thinks it could be better, he tells me that. And I do take his advice for the most part.
Where do you draw your material from? Okay, you did the first book on your mom. Now this book is called About Your Father, right? And other celebrities I have known. First of all, just how much do you reveal? Tell me one of the stories.
I reveal a lot, actually. This book is called About Your Father and Other Celebrities I Have Known. My husband is wonderful material. For 60 years, we've been living together and we've been married. Mm-hmm. And I just every day marvel at what a quirky character he is. And so I've been writing about him for a long time. And Mike has loved those stories also. And also, through Mike, we've had some wonderful experiences. We have made commercials for several products. So we've traveled to Hollywood, and we've seen that scene. And so people love to hear stories about that, a world that is unattainable for them, the world of glamour, of Hollywood, blah, 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 all that stuff. People love that. So I included a lot of that in my book. I'm a humorist. I write my writing is mostly humor. And a humorist is somebody who, I'm not a comedian. I don't do one-liners and jokes, but I look at the world around me. I look at my position in it, and I see humor. I can't help it. I just do. So material falls into my lap like manna from heaven. It's just there. It's just a matter of recognizing it, seeing it, and writing about it.
So now we know where Mike gets his insight.
Well, people say that all the time. I guess it's possible. Yeah, it is possible that, that Mike has taken cues from me. He also enjoys his father as a character.
So does quirkiness run in your family?
I believe it does. One of the things that I so miss about having children living at home, our three sons have grown, of course, and moved far, far away. They claim it's nothing personal, but, you have to wonder. So they live far away from us. And keeping in touch with them is just, part of our lives. Thank heavens for technology. There's Zoom and there's FaceTime. There's Skype and email and texting and social media.
How many kids do you have?
We have three sons.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and Mike lives on the West Coast, and the other two live in South Florida, and I'm up here in Maryland. So nobody is close.
Well, you have nice places to visit in the wintertime.
Isn't that the truth? We really do. We managed to visit Scott, our middle son, and his family in the winter. So we go down there. This year, I think we didn't get there until almost February, but usually it's January and February. And we have granddaughters, and they're school teachers, and our granddaughter is an educator. Well, she's a principal now, but so my husband and I both taught. So we have a lot in common.
With your kids being so far away, this is exactly opposite of what you had with your parents, right?
Total opposite, 180. We raised our family across the yard from my parents' home. It was kind of in the country, so it was a big lawn, they weren't right on top of us. But all three of our children were raised right there alongside of their grandparents. That said, their grandparents were busy people. My dad was an electrician in the beginning and then became a electrical contractor. And my mom sold real estate in those later years when the children came along. So they weren't breathing down our necks all the time. They were busy people. However, they were very much in our lives. And they were very connected to our church growing up, as we all were. So my family just, kind of followed in their footsteps. Dad was, he was an elder and a deacon in a Presbyterian church. And I was born in that church, and all three of our sons were baptized in that church and raised in that church. And my husband was an elder and deacon. So we were a very close family.
What role did faith play in raising your boys?
Well, when it comes to faith, my parents were wonderful role models. Neither one of them, neither dad nor mom, had any doubt at all that one day they would be together again for all eternity. They just had no doubts. They were, they were Christians, and they just had great faith. And I like to think they passed that down to me. And I think our children, have pretty much inherited that. And still, our church, the same church is still a very big part of our lives, my husband and mine. On Sundays now, with the with the coronavirus and the quarantining, every Sunday we Zoom church with our congregation. Tuesday mornings is Zoom Bible study. Wednesday evening is a church gathering. So, yeah, for 82 years plus, that church has been a mainstay in my life and now in my family's.
So how are you all dealing with this coronavirus reality? Has it set in? Have you accepted it? Or do you think it's a bunch of media hype, or it's a combination of a lot of things? Let me just ask you, do you think that this is something that that we're going to come out of in 3 or 4 or 6 months, or do you think it's going to take a generation to get through this?
Oh, I think we will come out of it. I think there will eventually be a vaccine, but I think we'll all be a lot smarter for it. I think we will all realize how vulnerable our population is. So in that respect, maybe something positive, will evolve from this. But we will definitely come out of it. I mean, I have every faith that things are going to be all right. This really was, it's a great sadness for many people. On a personal, selfish level, this really hit me hard in that my book came out at the height of this virus. I had a book tour scheduled. I was to go to 10 states, 14 different cities, meet with a lot of people, do a lot of presentations. I was really looking forward to it. But fate intervened, and here we are.
You didn't have to get on all those airplanes, and you still hit the bestsellers list.
I know. Go figure. Honestly, I am the most fortunate person in the world. Truly, I am.
If you really think about it, it's times like these where we need a little something different. We need a little humor. I mean, I stopped watching the news channels probably 2 weeks ago. I just couldn't take it anymore. And actually, I started watching Fox Business as opposed to Fox News because at least I get some insight from companies and people and innovation and people thinking differently versus just bad, news reporting. Not that I'm not calling Fox News bad news. I'm just talking about the content of what we have to hear all day long. So it's really cool that you come out with a book at this point that is, will make us smile.
Well, let me tell you something. When I first wrote the book about my mother, my publisher said, now you have to be on social media. Well, I didn't know anything about Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of those. In fact, I looked down my nose at them. I thought they were frivolous. So I went on to Facebook. They dragged me kicking and screaming onto Facebook, and I really hated it in the beginning. But it has been wonderful. I have met so many good people, so many nice people. I'll tell you something funny. Facebook kind of has a bad name in some ways. There is a woman who she's kind of a tech person who reads all of my posts, and her job is to make sure that everything that's posted is appropriate, which means that she would take down a post if it had profanity or, anything negative. And she talked to me not long ago, and she said, Peggy, this is unheard of. I have never, ever had to remove a post from your page. All of your followers are unfailingly nice, gracious people. And I have just about 150,000 people read me every day. It's amazing how it has grown. Now, I have learned a lot about what people like, what they want. People want to be uplifted. They want something positive. They love humor, and I can give them humor. So every other day I sit down and I write about 200-word post that is humorous, uplifting, and, they keep following me, and their comments are just priceless.
And is your Facebook page under Peggy Rowe?
No, it is under @TheReal Peggy Rowe.
Oh, okay.
That is my handle, @TheReal Peggy Rowe.
Have you ever met the fake Peggy Rowe?
Apparently there are a lot of Peggy Rowes out there.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea how many Peggy Rowes there actually were.
Let's hone in on something here, because I really want you to help me out, because there's somebody listening right now who's sitting at home. They have got all this time on their hands. They've always believed that they had this wit, this humor, this something, but maybe they just didn't have the courage to sit down and do it. Maybe they didn't have the time. Maybe they were commuting all day long. If you live in LA, you're usually on the road for 2 or 3 hours a day. But now they do have the time, so they don't have that excuse. What would you do to tell someone, to encourage someone, actually, to make the most of this time and make their dream a reality?
Well, I would say just what you just said. This is a wonderful opportunity to sit back and take note. Think of your life. Think of all of the stories that you have. This is a great time to just sit down and write. It doesn't matter if you're published. It doesn't matter if the world sees it. You will see it. It is gratifying you. It's filling your life. It's enriching your world. And guess what? Someday, maybe your children will enjoy reading your stories. Just write them. Or you could be very fortunate like I was, and somebody will read your stories and say, you know what, there's a book in here. It's never too late. I mean, if my story doesn't tell you anything else, it tells you that. I was 80 years old when my first book came out and became a bestseller, and I'm 82 now, and my second book just came out in April and has become a bestseller. If you had told me this was going to happen, told me 10 years ago this would happen, I would say you're deluded. It's never too late.
When did you first start writing, when you were working on your newspaper articles and that sort of thing? When did you first start? How did that happen?
I tell you, I was in my early 50s, and I had 2 granddaughters. And every once in a while they would come and spend a weekend with us. And after raising 3 sons, believe me, this was a treat. Well, they loved books and reading. So I wrote stories for them. And I wrote a book. I wrote a middle grade story, a middle grade novel about a little boy. The girls loved it. And that told me, of course they tell you, just because your grandchildren like your writing, that doesn't mean you're a good writer. Because your grandchildren love you, they're going to love your writing. But that did tell me that I could write something of interest. And so I did. I took some writing courses at the local college, at the community college. I took creative writing, and I started writing stories. And I joined a critique group of like-minded fellow writers. And we got together every week, maybe 4 or 5 of us, and then I joined another group, and there were maybe 15 of us. And I learned a lot from these people, and I learned what's good and what's not good. So there are things you can do if you think you want to be a writer. Take some courses, learn some of the do's and don'ts, join a support group, but most of all, just write and read. It's hard to be a writer if you don't read. You learn a lot from other writers.
That's great advice, and I'll tell you, there's really no excuse now. There's just so much information available online, and there's so many great courses. I subscribe to, for example, Masterclass. You get all this incredible insight from these, world-renowned CEOs and artists. It's pretty amazing. I look at the past month or 6 weeks or whatever it's been. I've lost track. It's been a blessing in disguise in many ways.
Yes, as long as you're not one of those people directly affected physically. It
Right.
really is. It has given us time to sit back and reflect and think about how fortunate we are. And that's what I'm doing. I'm reflect every day on how fortunate I am. And having met so many nice people to have so many new friends in my life. It's truly a blessing. And in a lot of ways, you're right. This quarantining has been a blessing.
You've been married for how many years? Did you say 60?
60, yeah.
So what has been the secret to those 60 years? How have you kept it together? Was there ever a time that you just thought, what the heck did I do?
How did I ever get involved in this? Well, sure, there are days when you feel that way. And you know what? I'd be lying if I didn't admit that there were times when I thought, holy cow, what have I gotten into? Jeez. But, if there's love as a foundation, then you can get through anything. You really can. And I think respect is so important. My husband respects me, and I respect him. And I'm not saying our marriage is perfect. But let me tell you something else that really is important, and that's a sense of humor. It would be so easy to sit back and really rail against something. But if you can laugh about it and say, oh my goodness, this really does have a humorous side. I know it isn't always easy. But for the most part, there is humor involved in almost everything.
Where did you and your husband, John, meet?
We met in college, actually. We were at Towson. In fact, it's the same college where our sons went. Towson University, it's called now, but it was Towson State Teachers College when we went there. So we both became teachers. We had a class together. It was called Physical Science. And my husband was a very serious person. Rarely smiled. And we sat next to. I was in front of him actually, and he sat in back of me. And one day, he did something so uncharacteristic for him, so out of character. He grabbed hold of my chair. This is during physical science class now, and pulled my chair back, like onto his lap and onto the floor. And there I was. And I screamed, and everybody laughed because everybody knew my husband. Even the professor thought it was really funny. And well, from that moment, I think that was the real moment I was smitten.
He pulled the chair out from under you?
Oh, no.
I'm trying to get this picture right.
Yeah, now that would be disastrous, and I wouldn't recommend that. No, he tilted the chair back because he was sitting behind me, tilted it onto his lap and maybe even a little bit lower, and honestly, my legs flailed in the air, and I screamed, and everybody just thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. And so, what can I say?
So here you've got this great little book with all these humor stories, and I noticed that there's a picture of you, your husband, and Mike on the front cover. Nobody's smiling. It's a great cover, by the way.
Well, it's that Grant Woods picture, and we kind of took liberties with it.
Yeah, I love it.
We were shooting a commercial out in California. And at the end of every shoot, there are still shots, which means a cameraman with a still camera, not movie camera, wants to take pictures. So we posed in all kinds of poses, and that actually was Mike's idea, that we hold a pitchfork and stand there looking all serious-like. Some of these stories in this book are letters that I have written to Mike through the years. I've written letters to all my children, but these are letters that I've written to Mike, all humorous. Some of them he read on his social media page, and they were, people loved them. They went viral. In one case, the story about my blue purse that I lost at Walmart went viral. It was read by over 7 God, what is it? 70 million, over 70 million people.
Whoa. A letter that you wrote to Mike has been read over 70 million times about a what? A blue purse at Walmart?
I went shopping at Walmart one day, and I came home and realized my purse was not in the car. And I traced, in my memory, I traced my steps and realized that I had left my purse hanging from a shopping cart in the Walmart parking lot, which doesn't sound funny, but, you know, I do find the humor in things. So I was able to make it funny, and the story went from there. And so I called my children right away, because that's what you do when there's a tragedy. And I said, I have practically lost my life. I've lost all my credit cards, my cell phone. I've lost, you know, all the material things that really are so important. And Mike said, don't tell me about it, Mom. Sit down and write about it. So I did, and I sent it to him. He made a video. He sat down and read my letter aloud, and then he went off on a job, came back, and realized it had been shared and read, watched over 70 million times.
Whoa.
It just went viral. And so he said, gee, Mom, I think we're on to something. Why don't you write me some more letters? So I did. So in this book are some other humorous letters that I've written to Mike, as well as some texts that I will send him from time to time. And he posts, and people find humorous. So, yeah. So that's why his picture's on the front with me.
I know all three of your sons have something special to their mom, but at what point did you realize that Mike had something special that would resonate with folks all over the world?
Oh, I think it was early on. You know, early on, when he left high school, he went with a local, he had a job with a local company, and he had a real estate show every Sunday morning. Well, it was very popular. People who were not even in the market for a new home watched Your New Home, it was called.
That was there in the Baltimore area?
It was, yeah, and it was in the 80s. No, it was, it was in the late 80s.
Okay.
And then he went from there to QVC, sang with the Baltimore Opera, and did a good job there and was popular, and then went on QVC, where he had a cult following on the West Coast. So I think I had a feeling, an inkling early on that anything Mike did in front of people was bound to be sort of successful. Did
he also star in the high school play?
He did.
How did I guess that?
Well, surprise, surprise. He played Curly in Oklahoma.
Okay. I can see that.
He was a senior. He was either a junior or a senior. And, of course, it was a hit. And we had never, to tell you the truth, we had never heard Mike sing a solo until that show. He was in all of the musical groups in high school. But until he was Curly in Oklahoma, we had not really heard him sing a solo. And John and I went to every performance, and of course my mother went too. And we sat in the audience, and that first night, when we heard "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning," in that rich bass baritone voice coming from off stage, we just looked at each other and our jaws dropped, and we were very surprised and pleased.
I have a similar story. When I was going to high school, I kind of finally came out of my shell my senior year, and I got the starring role in Guys and Dolls and played Sky Masterson. And
wow.
Oh yeah, and my mom and dad showed up. I think they were in shock that I could sing. But the great thing is I got to kiss the girl. Otherwise, I wouldn't get a date.
That's one of the perks. You do get to kiss the leading lady if you're lucky.
Yeah, and you got all those rehearsals too, so you get to practice.
That's right. You got to practice.
Well, Peggy, this has been great. This has been fun, and I really appreciate you hanging out with us here. And the book is called About Your Father and Other Celebrities I Have Known by Peggy Rowe, and you can find her online at The Real Peggy Rowe. That's ROWE on Facebook.
Thank you. Some more friends. That's great.
Let's keep in touch. And who knows, we may be hunkered down here for a few more months. So if that's the case, I've got all the time in the world to talk to you all the time.
And guess what, David? I like to talk.
Oh, I know you do. It's good. I love your stories. And I really look forward to reading the book.
Oh, thank you so much for this. This has been fun, David.
And thank you, Peggy. Peggy Rowe's book is About Your Father and Other Celebrities I Have Known. It's the follow-up to About My Mother, and that was Peggy Rowe's first book, which was also a New York Times bestseller with over 100,000 books sold. I didn't know that anybody sold that many books anymore. I mean, you just don't hear about these incredible stories. Of course, a buddy of mine actually published these books. He's on fire. He started this little book publishing company showing the big boys how to do it. His book company is called Forefront Books. Jonathan Merck is his name. And if you need somebody to publish your book, look him up and be sure to let him know why you are the next Peggy Rowe. He can find talent. He can find a needle in a haystack. So if you've got an incredible book, and by the way, don't be one of these people going, I got a book in me, but I haven't written it. Do you know how many people tell me that? Like probably 20 times a week. And I'm like, well, go write it. It's like, well, I don't have time. Really? I mean, what else have you been doing for the last 2 months? If you live in California and New York, you may have another couple of months to go. So, and we may all have more time on our hands in the next year. So if you got a book in you, go write the daggone thing and then contact my friend Jonathan and tell him you're his next big deal. I'm sure he's going to love that now, right? And by the way, he's on Facebook, everybody. Go look him up. And by the way, he did not pay. I want to emphasize something. He did not pay for that endorsement, nor did he pay for Peggy to be on this podcast. Nobody pays to be on this podcast. We don't let people buy their way onto this podcast. You have to be invited to be on this podcast. And by the way, we've been trying to get Peggy for some time. So I'm so grateful that she made herself available. Then again, what else does she have to do, right? If we were to ever get a guest on this podcast, it's probably been over the last 3 or 4 weeks or a couple of months, and we have some doozies coming up. We have some amazing guests coming up that I never thought we would ever be able to get on the phone. But then again, they've had nothing to do for the last few weeks. So in the weeks ahead, I've been telling you, we have like 5-star guests on this show, right? Well, if there's such a thing as a 5+ star, they are coming on. They are coming. Here they come. I can see them. I know who they are. And we're going to reveal those to you in the next few weeks. So be sure to check out Peggy Rowe's book, About Your Father and Other Celebrities I Have Known. It is already a New York Times bestseller. It's the follow-up to About My Mother, her previous New York Times bestseller. And that's available now on Amazon.com and on BNN.com. And I was going to say in your favorite bookstore, but I know there aren't a whole lot of bookstores open these days. But once they are open, I'm sure it's going to be front and center when you walk in the door. So that's it for this go-around for CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sams. Remember to go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living in black and white. And while you're at it, please go to Apple and rate and review this podcast. We would really appreciate that, because it is something that means a lot, and it helps to influence others to also listen to CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, from the producers of Keep the Faith. So we'll see you next time right here on CIA. Go out there and get them.